How to tell someone their behavior is rude without upsetting them. Learn how to tell someone their behavior feels rude without humiliating them, escalating tension, or damaging the relationship. This guide gives you calm wording, practical examples, and scripts you can adapt. Most people do not realize they sound rude. That is what makes this conversation so delicate. The person who interrupts others in meetings may think they are being enthusiastic. The person who makes a sharp joke may think they are keeping the mood light. The person who explains something in a superior tone may believe they are simply being helpful. From the outside, the behavior can still feel dismissive, humiliating, or disrespectful. You may feel tempted to say, "You are being rude." In some situations, that sentence may be accurate, but accuracy alone does not make feedback effective. When people hear labels such as rude, arrogant, disrespectful, or mean, they often stop thinking about the behavior and start protecting their identity. They defend their intention, argue about your tone, explain why they were misunderstood, or withdraw because they feel embarrassed. The goal is not to win the moment. The goal is to help the person understand how their words or behavior are landing, so they have a real chance to adjust them. The kindest correction is specific enough to be useful and respectful enough to be heard. In this guide, you will learn how to correct rude behavior without humiliating the other person, weakening your message, or turning a useful conversation into a personal argument. How to tell someone their behavior seems rude without calling them a rude person. How to describe the impact of their words calmly. What to say if they become defensive. How to correct interrupting, hurtful jokes, and condescending speech. How to protect your own boundaries if the behavior continues. Quick answer. How do you tell someone their behavior is rude? The best way to tell someone their behavior is rude is to focus on the behavior and its impact instead of attacking their character. Speak privately, assume good intent where reasonable, describe the specific moment, and explain how it may have affected others. Speak privately when possible. Assume positive intent unless you have clear reason not to. Name the specific behavior you noticed. Explain how it may affect other people. Offer a clearer or kinder alternative. A useful sentence is, "I do not think you meant it this way, but that comment may have sounded dismissive to other people." Why calling someone rude often backfires. Direct labels feel satisfying because they express your frustration quickly. The problem is that they rarely show the other person what to change. "You are rude" is a judgment. It does not identify the exact behavior, the moment it happened, or the impact it created. Once the conversation becomes about character, the person may focus on proving they are not a bad person instead of understanding what happened. This is why many correction attempts turn into arguments about intention. "I was only joking. That is not what I meant. You are too sensitive." Those replies are common because the person is trying to defend their intention. A more productive conversation separates intention from impact. You can accept that they did not mean to hurt anyone while still explaining that the behavior affected people negatively. You can say, "I understand that was not your intention. I am talking about how it may have come across." That sentence keeps the conversation calmer because it gives the person dignity while keeping the issue on the table. Why this happens inside the brain. When someone hears criticism, the brain often treats it less like information and more like a threat. Even a useful comment can feel like social danger if it suggests they are careless, unlikable, unfair, or embarrassing to be around. That is why rude behavior can be so difficult to correct. The person may not be responding to your actual words. They may be responding to the fear that they are being judged as a bad person. Once that fear appears, people often protect themselves by explaining their intention, minimizing the effect, or turning the attention back onto you. They might say you misunderstood them, that everyone is too sensitive, or that they were only being honest. A calmer approach gives their brain less to defend against. When you describe one behavior and one impact, the conversation feels more manageable. Instead of hearing, "I am being attacked," they have a better chance of hearing, "There is one thing I can adjust." The core principle: talk about impact, not character. A rude behavior is not the same thing as a rude person. That distinction matters because people can usually hear, "That comment sounded harsh." They struggle much more with, "You are a harsh person." When you focus on behavior, you make change possible. When you focus on character, you make the person feel trapped inside a label. A stronger approach is to describe what happened, explain the effect it may have had, and give the person room to correct it. Describe what happened. Explain the effect it may have had. Suggest a clearer or kinder alternative. Stay calm if they need a moment to absorb the message. Example: avoiding a character attack. Less helpful: you are arrogant when you talk to people. Better: when people are interrupted before they finish, it can feel as if their ideas are not being heard. The second version still names the problem, but it does not corner the other person into defending their whole personality. It gives them one behavior to notice and one social effect to consider. Start with positive intent. When the relationship matters, begin by showing that you are not trying to embarrass them. This does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means opening the conversation in a way that lowers defensiveness before you deliver the difficult part. I wanted to mention something because I think you would want to know. I do not think you were trying to upset anyone, but I noticed something that may be affecting how people respond. These openings help because they protect the person's dignity. They suggest that the behavior can change without turning the person into the problem. Positive intent is especially useful when the person seems unaware of the effect they are having. Many people who sound rude are not trying to be cruel. They may be rushed, nervous, overly direct, socially unaware, or used to a different communication style. You can still be honest, or simply choosing an entrance that gives the conversation a chance. Describe the specific behavior. Vague criticism sounds unfair. Specific feedback sounds more credible, because it gives the person something concrete to examine. Avoid broad claims like, "You always upset people." "Everyone thinks you are rude." "Nobody likes the way you talk." These statements are emotionally heavy, but not very useful. They create shame without showing the person what to change. Instead, describe one moment clearly. In today's meeting, Sarah was still explaining her point when you spoke over her. When you joked about Mark's mistake, he became quiet for the rest of the discussion. Specificity reduces argument. It also helps the person replay the situation and understand what you mean. If they disagree, you still have a real example to discuss instead of a vague accusation. Evidence from everyday life. Most rude behavior does not announce itself dramatically. It often appears in small moments that people explain away because each one seems minor on its own. Someone checks their phone while another person is speaking. Someone jokes about a mistake and assumes everyone understands it was harmless. Someone says "obviously" before explaining something, not realizing the word makes the listener feel stupid. In many groups, nobody corrects these moments directly. People stay polite, change the subject, or discuss the discomfort later with someone else. The person who caused the discomfort may walk away thinking everything was fine because no one objected in the moment. This is why specific feedback matters. It gives the person information they may not be receiving anywhere else. Without that information, they may keep repeating the same behavior while genuinely believing no one is affected by it. Use a simple 4-part structure. When you are unsure what to say, use a structure that keeps the conversation balanced. You want enough warmth to reduce defensiveness and enough clarity to make the message useful. Good intent. I wanted to mention something because I think you would want to know. Behavior. When someone is still speaking, you sometimes jump in before they finish. Impact. I have noticed that people become quieter afterward. Alternative. Waiting a few seconds before responding may help people feel heard. This structure works because it turns an awkward correction into a practical observation. You are not attacking. You are naming a pattern, explaining why it matters, and giving the person a clear way forward. Examples of what to say. Different rude behaviors require slightly different wording, but the aim is always the same. Be clear, calm, and specific. The examples below show how to correct the behavior without making the person feel publicly shamed or personally attacked. Example 1. Someone keeps interrupting. Less helpful. You never let anyone talk. Better. I do not think you are doing it intentionally, but you sometimes jump in before people finish their thought. A few people seem to stop contributing afterward, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Example 2. Someone makes hurtful jokes. Less helpful. Your jokes are mean. Better. I know you may not intend to hurt anyone, but when you joked about Mark's mistake, it seemed to make him uncomfortable and quiet afterward. And that is how to address these behaviors effectively. Better. I know you are probably trying to be funny, but some jokes about people's mistakes can make them uncomfortable. It may not be coming across the way you intend. Example 3. Someone talks down to others. Less helpful. You act like you are smarter than everyone. Better. Sometimes when you explain things, it can sound more like correction than help. I know that may not be what you mean, but it can make people feel small. Example 4. Someone uses a sharp tone. Less helpful. Why are you always so rude? Better. Your point is important, but the tone sounded quite sharp. It may be easier for people to respond if it is said a little more calmly. Even a careful sentence can still feel uncomfortable to the other person. That does not mean you handled it badly. Nobody enjoys hearing that their words may have hurt or embarrassed someone, and some people need time before they can take in the message. If they deny it, repeat the point calmly and avoid arguing about their entire personality. I am not saying you meant to upset anyone. I am saying it may have landed that way. If they accuse you of being too sensitive, bring the conversation back to behavior and impact. You may see it differently. I still wanted to mention the effect it seemed to have in the room. If they become angry, do not match their intensity. A calm response helps you keep control of your own tone and prevents the conversation from becoming a fight about who is more disrespectful. I do not want this to become an argument. I wanted to share it respectfully because I thought it mattered. The goal is not to force immediate agreement. The goal is to communicate clearly and leave them with something useful to consider. In many cases, the person may resist in the moment and still think about your words later. What not to do when correcting rude behavior. Do not embarrass them publicly. Correcting someone in front of other people often creates humiliation instead of reflection. If the behavior is not urgent or harmful in the moment, speak privately. Do not use a hidden crowd. Avoid phrases like "everyone thinks this" or "people have been talking about you." Even if others are concerned, those phrases make the person feel surrounded and judged. Do not overload them with every example. Choose 1 or 2 clear examples. A long list can feel like an attack, especially if the person did not know there was a problem. Do not apologize for having a boundary. Kindness is important, but it should not make your message disappear. You can be respectful and still be firm. If the behavior continues, sometimes a person listens and changes. Sometimes they understand later. Sometimes they choose not to adjust at all. If you have explained the issue clearly, calmly, and privately, you do not need to keep having the same conversation forever. At some point, boundaries become more useful than explanations. You can say, "I'm happy to continue the conversation when we can speak respectfully. I have mentioned this before. I am not comfortable staying in a conversation where people are spoken to that way." If the behavior happens at work and affects others, it may also be appropriate to involve a manager, team lead, or HR contact, depending on the seriousness of the situation. You are responsible for communicating respectfully. You are not responsible for making another adult accept feedback perfectly. What effective professionals do differently. Effective professionals do not correct every irritating comment in the same way. They make a quick judgment about the situation, the relationship, the setting, and the likely impact of speaking up. If the behavior is small and unlikely to repeat, they may let it pass. If it affects trust, teamwork, confidence, or respect, they address it calmly before resentment builds. They also choose the right level of directness. A close friend may need a warm, private comment. A colleague may need a factual observation. A repeated workplace pattern may need a clearer boundary. The skill is not simply being nice. It is knowing how to be honest without being careless, and kind without being vague. Frequently asked questions and myths. How do you politely tell someone they are being rude? Speak privately, avoid labels, and describe the specific behavior. For example, "I do not think you meant it this way, but that comment may have sounded dismissive." Should I say someone is rude directly? Usually, it is better to name the behavior instead of calling the person rude. "That sounded harsh" is easier to hear than "you are rude." What if someone says, "I am too sensitive"? Stay calm and return to the impact. You might say, "You may see it differently, but I wanted to mention how it seemed to affect the conversation." How do I correct rude behavior at work? Use a factual and professional tone. Refer to the situation, the effect on the team, and the behavior that would work better next time. What if the person keeps being rude after I speak to them? Repeat your boundary once if needed, then reduce the opportunity for the behavior to continue. In a workplace, escalate through the appropriate channel if it affects others or becomes harmful. How can I sound kind without being unclear? Use warm wording at the beginning and clear wording in the middle. Start with positive intent, then name the exact behavior and its impact. Final thoughts. The most effective way to tell someone they are being rude is often not to use the word rude at all. Help them see the gap between what they intended and how their behavior affected other people. That is the space where change can happen. When you describe the behavior, explain the impact, and speak with respect, you give the person a real chance to improve without feeling humiliated. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is tell someone a difficult truth. The skill is delivering that truth in a way that keeps dignity intact. Related articles: How to be blunt without being rude, How to give feedback that improves performance, and How to respond to condescending colleagues. Practice with Spekero. Before you say something difficult in real life, practice it out loud. A sentence can look calm when written down, but sound irritated, rushed, or apologetic when spoken. Use Spekero to record 3 versions of the same message: the version you would say when you are irritated, the version that is too soft and unclear, the version that is kind, clear, and specific. Listen for a blaming tone, words that attack character, over-apologizing, unclear examples, a calm alternative the person can actually use. The goal is not to sound perfect. The goal is to sound respectful enough that the other person can hear the message and clear enough that they understand what needs to change.